Mickey, it seems like we've talked about half the conversation because we've spent a lot of time about questions I might ask or statements I might make.
Right.
But there's another part of the conversation, and that's my listening.
We say it's the most important part of the conversation because listening really precedes speaking. We work with many people around the world on the quality of their presentations, teachers, consultants, executives, trainers, and they all think we're going to work with them on glib words. What we actually work with them on is what are you focusing on, and what does that focus have come out of your mouth? So we say if you want to be graceful and effective as a speaker, it all starts with listening anyway. And you can look at the whole conversation meter in the context of listening. You can say that if somebody focuses all of their listening attention on avoiding the difficulty they're in front of, they will lie and withhold information. You'll see it causes pretense. So the listening to avoid problems, difficulty, conflict will cause dishonesty. In sincerity, this listening for my own opinion. Well, what do I think about this? What do I think about that? So if I have all my listening attention on my own opinion, that's going to have me be protective, defensive, fully expressive about my view as though it's the whole view. In an accurate conversation, it's listening to learn accurately, listening to learn by understanding facts and explanations. In an authenticity conversation, it's listening to learn authentically, listening to discover important purposes that explain this person's relationship to that situation. So listening for us is more important than speaking because it creates speaking. In fact, people who speak without an underlying connection and listening that genuinely gives rise to those words come across as mechanical con artists rather than real human beings having a real and valuable effect.
So is there a way to measure that listening and how effective I'm being in my listening?
Well, one thing that we've done over the years is invite people to use something that's also in the communication catalyst, which is a little diagram that we call the ladder of listening. This is again to fit with what Jim Matrone talks about as our ability to diagnose, predict, and prescribe. You can use it for that. The conversation meter came up in conversations between Richard Reinashek and me about, gee, there must be something other than just lying and telling the truth. The ladder of listening came up because Richard raised an issue one day where he said, you know, we're asking people to go all the way from bioreaction to an authentic intersection. That seems like a big jump. Do you think we ought to create any stages that allow people to get there without having to have that huge heroic jump every time? And so Dr. Reinashek's provocative question opened up a conversation between us, and what we ended up coming up with is just reflective of what we've seen through the years. So we created this ladder where at the lowest rung, what you get good at catching is bioreaction. Each rung of the ladder has points. The bioreaction rung, you get 0 points, but below that you're in minus. So if you can't notice, you're in negative points. So at bioreaction, you're noticing the effect stress is having on you. You're noticing if you're having a fight, a flee, a freeze, or an appease reaction. Once you notice it, then you can move to the next rung on the ladder, which we say is listening for compassion, which is listening to understand what's happening for someone and what does it mean to them. So you're there to really get as accurately as you can with emotional sensitivity what's happening and what does it mean to this person. If you're listening for compassion, you're not trying to get them to be different. You're not trying to add to their situation. You're not trying to subtract from it. You're just trying to fully and compassionately comprehend it. We find that often that frees people to be more creative just because they know they've been fully heard without some negative, harsh, critical judgment. Many men struggle with that domain of listening because we've been so trained, and there's biological reasons that have to do with testosterone, that as soon as somebody voices a problem, kill it, fix it, solve it, rather than fully appreciate what someone's in. If you really want to be responsible for developing the strength and contribution of others, that rung on the ladder is really important because it frees them to get their own whole brain back engaged, and they become a great agent where they feel empowered to solve their own problems. So we think it's really important. Above compassion, where we say level 3, is being able to hear essential purpose, the kind of purpose that's authentic and fundamental, one the person cannot abandon and be in any way true to themselves. So if you get really good at that, you learn what's truly important to people, and you learn to ask questions like, even if I disagree with a lot of what they're doing, what purpose do they have that I can respect? Something that's essential to them that I can actually regard. Above that, level 4, is the intersection itself, because we say if you've got compassionate listening to learn, and you are authentically connected to a purpose that's essential to that human being, you naturally then bring your own circumstances and purposes to it. The intersection tends to just emerge. It becomes obvious, where we have these surprising places where we could do this together, we could do that. We think the notion of the intersection is exciting and important and an occasion for ongoing research. You know, the printing press actually was not made up full-blown by Gutenberg. He was actually looking at his own desire to see, so his purpose, to see people be able to have access to books like the Bible without having to go through having them written down and held by only certain people. So that's his purpose. Well, there was a couple of other things he noticed, which is how a coin stamp worked and how a wine press worked. His original idea for the printing press came from the intersection between coin stamp, wine press, and his desire to be able to have books be more widely available. That's an intersection. And we can see those all the time in our lives. If we climb that ladder of listening, those intersections will emerge. They will reveal themselves.